This class of ships changed cruising when they first launched, and that might be a problem. Because while others in the Voyager class have been amplified, the Explorer of the Seas had their modernization during COVID canceled, so it's still sailing with a nearly 30-year-old design. And so as I set sail, I had one question. Would this design that's ancient by cruise industry standards feel refreshingly classic, or would it feel like cruising evolved without it? Well, let's get into it. I've sailed a lot of royal ships over the years. Some were brand new and truly iconic, with others barely recognizable from their original launch. But this one isn't either of those things. Stepping on board felt like stepping into a version of royal that the rest of the fleet had already moved past. Not in a dramatic way or in a this is falling apart kind of way, but in a way that really begins to take notice as you settle into the rhythm of the cruise. Because cruising has evolved and spaces have been redesigned and more importantly, flow has been optimized. But this ship is still operating from its original playbook. So in this sailing, I paid attention to see if that old school playbook still works, how the layout handles real crowds, whether the public spaces bring out the old school personality or if they're just overcrowded, and if the dining and entertainment have kept up with the industry. By the end of this review, you'll know exactly who this ship is a smart pick for and who should seriously consider something different. Oh, and if we haven't met yet, I'm Evan from Family at Sea. If this is your first time watching my channel, I'm glad you're here. And if you've been here a while, you already know how much I appreciate you. If you're ready, I am. Let's go. Port Canaveral is one of the more familiar ports you'll sail from if you're on the East Coast, and Terminal 5 was my home base for this one. That terminal has been around since the early 90s and it's going through major renovations, so it's not much to look at right now, but functionally it got the job done. There was no traffic getting in, which set the stage for one of the smoothest port arrivals I've had. I stepped out of my Uber, handed my bags to the porter, made my way into the terminal. In less than 20 minutes, I had cleared security, gotten checked in, and was taking my first steps on board. I boarded onto the outdoor promenade and made my way inside to check in at my muster station and then set out to explore the ship for the first time. The Royal Promenade was a revolutionary idea when this class of ships launched, but after seeing what Royal's done with it since, walking through this one felt like a rough draft. It runs the length of several decks through the middle of the ship with shops, bars, and gathering spaces lining both sides. And if you've spent time on a newer royal ship, you're going to instantly recognize the concept. But where ships like the Wonder or Icon of the Seas have pushed the promenade further with their wide open designs, while it's the same concept on the Explorer, the scale is just smaller and feels much more cramped. Now I'll say, one of the things I genuinely liked was how they used the space overlooking the Royal Promenade on the aft side on each landing as you make your way upstairs. Deck 6 has the next cruise desk, Deck 7 has a library with actual books and board games and puzzles, and Deck 8 has a computer lab which, if nothing else, gives you a sense of when the ship was built. As I made my way through the space, I realized I was getting hungry. Now, I typically do what I can to avoid the buffet on embarkation day, but there weren't many other options on this ship other than that and the MDR, but one of the options that they did have was Johnny Rockets. Now, I've been in Johnny Rockets on land plenty of times, but never on a royal ship, so I figured it was time. The burger there was decent, but the real highlight was the Coke Zero float and the tableside dance the servers did as I enjoyed my meal. It was a fun, unexpected way to start the cruise. And as I finished my lunch, the cruise director came over the intercom to let us know our cabins were ready. So I grabbed my bags and headed to check out what would be my home for the next 4 days. I made my way down to Deck 8 and found my cabin, 8334, on the starboard side of the ship. Stepping inside was immediately obvious this was an area of the ship that hasn't really been kept up with. The blue mosaic tile in the bathroom and the wood tones throughout all scream early 2000s decor, but once you look past the design, functionally the room worked great. It was clean, the bed was comfortable, and there was more space and storage than I expected, with cabinets and drawers tucked in everywhere and a full closet with shelves. And the natural light coming through the balcony door made the whole room feel bigger than it is. The drawers and the closet doors had a bad habit of sticking and clearly needed new hardware installed, but it was a minor complaint and really just a small reminder that this ship is over 25 years old. The balcony that I'm on right now was small, but the curved hull on the right side framed the view of the ocean as if you were looking at a priceless piece of art. And I ended up spending a lot more time out here than I usually do just because the views and the ambience were so incredible. The bathroom was dated, but it did its job with a shower that had consistent water pressure and temperatures, which is all I really asked for anyways. And for a ship this old, the cabin held up better than I anticipated, even if visually it was dated. The Explorer of the Seas prices itself where you'd expect a ship of this age to land, with interior cabins starting around $240 per night for 2 people, and ocean view cabins coming in around $280. And those are reasonable prices for an older ship like this, but the balcony cabins are where it gets harder to justify. Start around $400 per night, and for a 25-year-old cabin with dated decor, that's a lot to ask. Suites start around $500 per night for 2 people, but there's no coastal kitchen or suite deck like you'll find on the newer ships, so really you're just paying for a bigger room and a few minor amenities. And look, I gotta be honest, at these price points, the real question isn't whether it's affordable, it's what kind of cruise experience you're actually getting for the money. Because a low fare might get people on board, but it's the day-to-day experience that determines whether you're actually having a great time and feel good about what you paid. And that's exactly why we book through Cruises It. Instead of guessing, you're working with people who actually understand the ships, the pricing patterns, and how different cabins change the onboard experience. They've saved us thousands over the years, helped us land better cabins, and kept us from making choices we would have regretted later. Which is more than I can say for Frank, who once told me, "Evan, I found a great deal booking it myself online." Frank, you also found a great deal on that used car that spent the first 6 months at the mechanic. With their low price guarantee and people who actually care, Cruises It makes booking simpler, cheaper, and a whole lot less stressful. So click the link in the description below or call the number on the screen and tell them Evan from Family at Sea sent you. You'll be glad you did. The Explorer is an easier ship to navigate than some of the older ships I've been on, with a layout that makes sense and very few dead ends. A few of the spaces on the upper decks can be a little confusing to get to as they're accessible from the aft of the ship only, but once you get used to that, it's all pretty simple. The Royal Promenade runs through the middle of the ship and has everything you'd expect, with shops, bars, guest services, shore excursions, and Cafe Promenade, which is your go-to spot for coffee and pastries, and also doubles as the pizza spot since there's no Sorrentos on Voyager-class ships. Up on the Lido deck, the pool area is split into 2 pools with a deck between them and a stage for live music and entertainment. There's a pool bar at the main pool level and a second bar 1 deck above with a view down over the whole space, plus 4 hot tubs lining the area. It's a well-designed setup that handles a crowd reasonably well. The solarium is the adults-only pool area, and it's a nice spot with 2 large hot tubs and a quieter vibe away from the main pool energy. But the catch is there's no retractable roof like you typically see in a solarium, so when the weather turns, the space becomes mostly unusable, forcing crowds inside and making things feel even more crowded. But one thing I stumbled onto that most people on my sailing seem to completely miss was there's also a large hot tub inside the entrance to the fitness center. It was quiet every time I walked past it, so if you're looking for a soak without the crowd, that's the spot. The sports court at the aft of Deck 13 is where you head when you're looking for active fun, with a rock climbing wall, a full sports court for basketball, soccer, and pickleball, a flow rider, 2 water slides, and the Explorer Dunes mini golf course. And for a ship this old, it's a solid activity deck. The casino is small, gets very crowded in the evenings and on sea days, and the cigarette smoke is hard to escape. But one thing I did genuinely like there was the floor that as you walk in, it's got a treasure buried below the acrylic see-through flooring. And it's a small detail, but it's the kind of personality touch that makes you wish more of the ship had that same creative energy. Dining options on the Explorer of the Seas are fairly limited, which comes with the territory on a ship this age. I just made that word up. Dining options on the Explorer of the Seas are fairly limited, which comes with the territory on a ship this size and age. Chops Grill is the steakhouse on board, and my experience there was one of the most frustrating meals I've ever had at sea. I arrived right when they opened at 5 p.m. to a nearly empty restaurant, but for whatever reason, it took an hour from the time I got there until my main entree, a bone-in ribeye steak, finally arrived. Now, I always order my steaks medium rare, but what arrived is medium well and honestly pushing well done. But since it took an entire hour to get there, I just accepted it. But at this point, the 6 p.m. wave of reservations came in and they were all arriving at the same time, and I never saw my server again after that. And so after eating some of my steak and waiting 30 minutes to order dessert and not seeing him, I finally got frustrated enough that I just decided dessert really wasn't worth waiting any longer. So I went ahead and left. Now, I didn't make a big scene, but It was definitely a disappointing experience. Now, fortunately, the main dining room experience on the Explorer was far better than the steakhouse. I had 3 of my 4 dinners in the main dining room, and every single one was a great experience. The food was consistently well prepared, and my server, Eileen, was attentive the whole way through, and she was always ready with a refill or to check in, and I was in and out in under an hour every night. Beyond that, there's Giovanni's Table, which I didn't get to experience on this 4-day sailing, but I talked to some others that did, and they said it was great. And of course, there's Azumi, which is the Japanese restaurant on board, but on this ship, they don't have a hibachi grills, it's only the sushi. The food there was good, the service was efficient, and it made for a solid lunch. Now, I gotta say, I'm not really a big buffet fan, but I stayed on board for both of our ports on the sailing simply because I've been to Nassau and Coco Cay so many times, and well, I had to get work done. This is work for me. But I went to the buffet, and the buffet was nothing better than fine. Not worse than fine, right? Like, it wasn't bad. I've definitely had worse, but it was fine. I will note there that both times I was there, and I stayed for a bit because I was working on things as I ate, I was never offered a drink the entire time. Now, I don't know if that's because they don't have drink service in the Windjammer buffet on the ship, or if simply I didn't get service. I don't know which it is, but in any case, I was never offered a drink, which is, I'm a little bit surprised by that. I just went up to the bar, got my own. It wasn't the end of the world, but usually you expect someone's going to say, hey, can I bring you a drink or whatever? Never happened, whatever. And the bars, they were a different story. And I think a lot of it came down to the sailing I was on. This was a 4-night weekend sailing, and well, is probably the most intense booze cruise atmosphere I've been on in quite some time. There were multiple groups with 200 to 300 people on board, and the bars simply weren't staffed to handle that kind of influx of volume. You'd settle into a spot, whether it was the tavern or the Schooner Piano Bar down on deck 4, Dizzy's Lounge up on deck 15, or the R Bar or the Crown and Kettle off the Royal Promenade. Within minutes, a big group would arrive, and the energy of the space would completely shift, and getting a drink would, well, become a problem. Now, I'm usually good at finding the quiet corners on a ship, but on this sailing, those corners never lasted long, though I'll say the pool bars stayed open until midnight and became a great spot to grab a drink once the energy shifted inside, as long as the weather cooperated, which fortunately on this sailing, it was beautiful every day. Overall, though, the food and drink on the Explorer was definitely a mixed bag. The main dining room carried the experience, but Chop's Grill was a miss, as I told you, and the bar situation showed the weak points in an older design that doesn't provide enough opportunities for crowds to really spread out based on the number of people on board. Entertainment is typically the highlight of any Royal Caribbean cruise, even on older ships, but this is the first time I'm walking away from a Royal cruise thinking the shows were honestly a disappointment. The 3 main production shows, the Welcome Aboard show on day 1 that featured a live orchestra and a couple singers, and then the Invitation to Dance and Fast Forward, which were the 2 production shows. The performers on board, they were talented, but the shows themselves just fell flat. The Welcome Aboard show in particular it set a tone that the entertainment just really never recovered from. And across all 3 shows, there was a noticeable gap between what I've come to expect from Royal's production quality and what was actually delivered. Then, of course, there's the ice show, which is the spirits of Seasons in Studio B, and it's always cool to see ice shows on Royal ships. There's just something about watching an ice skating performance on a cruise ship in the middle of the Caribbean that it just doesn't get old. But beyond the novelty of it, the production itself didn't really reach the level I've seen in Studio B on other ships. And the cruise director on the Explorer, Jerry, was okay, but nothing special. He had decent energy, seemed like a really friendly guy, and he kept things moving, but he just didn't bring the same level of enthusiasm as the truly great cruise directors. But I gotta say, Royal's cruise directors as a whole feel like they've fallen behind some of the competitors on other cruise lines, and this sailing definitely didn't change that impression. Where the entertainment did work, though, was outside the theater. The theme nights in the Royal Promenade were genuinely fun, and the 80s night in particular seemed to take over the entire ship in a way that you don't often see. And I suspect a lot of that was because of these large groups on board really leaning into it with their outfits and excitement, and they created a really strong atmosphere, and it was fun. And up on the Lido deck, there was something going on at all times during the day, whether it was the belly flop contest, World's Sexiest Man, dance classes, or live music. And people up there they were having a good time until the sun went down every day. So look, the Explorer had life, it just wasn't coming from the main stage. Service on the Explorer was mostly efficient. Outside of that experience at Chop's Grill, things generally worked the way they were supposed to. But with the ship as crowded as it was, most interactions were purely transactional. You got what you needed and everyone moved on. But on a sailing this full, there simply wasn't enough time to connect with the crew in any meaningful way. The one exception to that was my server in the main dining room, Eileen, and she was amazing. And somehow, in the middle of what was a fairly chaotic sailing, she managed to have a smile on her face every single night, and that kind of thing stands out when everything around it is rushed. The bar situation in the evenings was genuinely difficult, but I do want to be fair about it. This wasn't a crew problem. The crew were working hard and doing what they could to keep up. The ship simply doesn't have enough bar venues to absorb the number of passengers on board when things get busy. And on this sailing, things were busy from the moment we boarded. Now look, to give some perspective here, right before this cruise, I was on the Carnival Elation, which is arguably the oldest ship in Carnival's fleet. And going in, I assumed that would be the rowdier of the two sailings, but I was wrong, y'all. The Explorer was loud and crowded from the moment we set sail up until the final night, and not in a dangerous or rowdy kind of way. I'll say, look, my fellow passengers were genuinely fun and friendly, and I didn't really encounter anybody rude the entire time. But relaxing, well, that was not the case on this cruise. So if you're looking for a peaceful escape, this particular itinerary probably isn't the one for you. So if you're considering the Explorer of the Seas, here's a few things that would have been helpful for me to know going in. First, go in with the right expectations. This is an older ship at a lower price point, and the crowd reflects that. If you can, book a longer sailing or a sailing that's not over the weekend, and you'll likely have a much more relaxing experience. The 4-night weekend itinerary is a different experience to what most people think of when they think of Royal Caribbean. And look, I gotta say, Royal Caribbean boasts it, they have the fastest internet at sea. But I've done speed tests on every single cruise I've been on across all 10 major cruise lines operating out of US ports, and well, it's simply not true. In fact, the internet on the Explorer was both the slowest and the least reliable with the most frequent drops of any cruise I have ever been on. It was genuinely awful trying to upload shorts and reels and stuff like that from the ship. It took hours sometimes to upload very small files. And if you want a good steak, honestly, you're probably better off ordering one from the upgraded menu in the MBR. That's what I did tonight, and my filet tonight was a million times better than what I had in Chops Grill last night. But if you still want to try Chops Grill and hope for a better experience than I had, get there at 5 p.m. right when they open and just let your server know, hey, I got to be in and out in less than an hour, and they'll do their best to make that happen, and I suspect you'll have a far better experience. And for the introverts, the quiet spots on this ship are few and far between, but a few of the spots I found that you'll like are the library on deck 7 overlooking the Royal Promenade. There's a desk in the back corner of the computer lab on deck 8 that's about as private as you'll get, and the Viking Crown Lounge, if you're diamond or higher, is another great option. And surprisingly, the pool bars in the evenings once the crowd moves indoors was honestly one of the best spots. And don't forget, if you want a hot tub that isn't crowded, inside the fitness center is a really big one, and I never saw a crowd there once. So with all that said, there's something I still appreciate about sailing on an older ship. There's a familiarity and simplicity to it all, and you can kind of feel the history of it in the design. But the Explorer is best suited for folks that are newer to cruising who don't know how much better things can be on other ships, or people who prioritize the itinerary over the ship, or someone who just wants an affordable Royal Caribbean experience without high expectations for the onboard product. If you've sailed newer Royal ships though, the gaps you're going to see on the Explorer are going to be hard to ignore. And look, here's the simple truth. This is probably the least favorite Royal cruise I've ever been on, and I don't say that lightly. So I probably won't come on the ship again, but if I do, it'd be because it has an itinerary and a price that's just hard to beat. And here's reality. Not every ship stands the test of time, and the Explorer of the Seas is honestly proof that even a revolutionary idea can start to show its age when the rest of the fleet keeps moving forward and the older ships aren't kept up with. The good news? I recently sailed on the oldest ship still sailing of any mainstream cruise line, and the experience there couldn't have been more different, and I share the full experience with you in this next review. So don't stop here, watch that one next to find out why that old ship gave me one of the best cruise experiences I've ever had. I'll see you over there. If you're ready, I am. Let's go.